the mistress of King George IV, Maria Fitzherbert. Hush, hush bombshells about Maria Fitzherbert, Britain's forbidden queen. Her origins were cloaked in scandal and mystery. Maria Fitzherbert was born Maria Ann Smith in 1756 in the quiet English county of Shropshire. But beneath that innocent beginning lay whispers darker than most could imagine. She was born at the Duke of Kingston Castle, and rumours swirled that her real father might have not been Walter Smith, but the Duke himself, a man infamous for his own scandalous escapades. This murky lineage cast a shadow over her birth, painting her as a pawn in the noble family's sordid secrets before she'd even taken her first breath. At just 16, Maria was forced into a marriage with Edward Weld, a man twice her age and wealthy beyond measure. On paper, it was a golden match, securing her future and status. But in reality, it was a cold, transactional union devoid of passion or tenderness. Edward was a distant figure, more interested in managing his estates than a young girl that he'd married, leaving Maria's heart to wither in loneliness. Yet she endured, driven by survival and social expectation. Barely settling into her role as wife, Maria's fragile new world was shattered when Edward suffered a brutal fall from his horse and died painfully from his injuries. The young widow was suddenly alone, stunned and ironically freed, but not freedom came with a cruel catch. She believed she'd inherit Edward's vast fortune, but fate had a harsher plan. When Edward's will was finally read, the air turned icy. Maria, the grieving widow, was not even mentioned once. Her husband's sudden death had come too quickly for him to update his will, leaving every penny, every acre, in the hands of Edward's younger brother, Thomas. Maria was left destitute overnight, a woman scorned by fate and family alike. Thomas Weld showed no mercy. Despite Maria's desperate pleas, he refused to grant her even a penny of the estate. He had 15 children to care for, and he argued coldly, while Maria was childless and in his eyes an interloper. The brutal rejection left her with nothing but heartbreak and humiliation, abandoned by the very family that she had married into. Without a penny to her name and no children to secure her position, Maria was thrust into poverty and desperation. The society that once welcomed her now turned a blind eye. She had to claw her way back, not just for money, but for dignity, status, and the very right to exist in a world that disregarded women like used goods. 3 years later, Maria wed Thomas Fitzherbert. This marriage was no fairy tale. There was little romance, just a desperate alliance. The couple barely escaped scandal themselves, as Thomas was a Catholic in a Protestant country, placing Maria in political crosshairs that she hadn't bargained for. Yet, for a brief moment, she found some happiness with the birth of a son. Maria's fragile happiness was shattered again. Her son was taken from her by a mysterious illness at a tender age, leaving her bereft. Then, in 1781, her husband was viciously attacked in an anti-Catholic riot, a brutal reminder of the hatred that Catholics faced. His wounds were fatal, and Maria was once more left alone, mourning 2 devastating losses that plunged her deeper into isolation. This time luck seemed to smile on Maria. Her second husband's will provided her with a modest annual income and a townhouse in London's prestigious Mayfair. It was a lifeline, not a fortune, but enough to keep her afloat in a cutthroat world of the capital, but not nearly enough to erase her past scars or secure her future. Now 28 and twice widowed, Maria finally tasted freedom and the intoxicating power that came with it. Entering London's glittering high society, she quickly realized that she was far more than a tragic figure. Her wit, beauty, and charm made her a sought-after woman, a prize in a city obsessed with status and scandal. For the first time, she controlled the narrative of her own life. Maria's reputation soared. Men were captivated not just by her beauty, but by the magnetic intelligence and refinement that she carried with effortless grace. Admirers flocked, whispering of her allure in the hushed salons and smoky gambling dens alike. But among all of her suitors, one man's desire for her would change history forever. George, Prince of Wales, a notorious royal hellraiser, barely in his 20s, set his sights on Maria with a single-minded obsession. Though she was 6 years his senior and twice widowed, she ignited a flame in his reckless heart. He was infamous for his excesses, drinking, gambling, womanizing. But with Maria, he was determined to be different, desperate to tame this wild impulses and win her hand. Despite George's royal allure, Maria was unimpressed. She knew all too well about his debauched lifestyle, his crushing debts, and his notorious infidelity. She wasn't interested in being just another conquest or a pawn in his political games. The prince's charming facade didn't fool her. She was determined to keep her independence and dignity intact, even if it meant breaking his heart. George's passionate pursuit collided with Maria's icy restraint. She refused to be dazzled or intimidated, and her rejection cut deeper than any insult. This unreciprocated obsession consumed George, pushing him into bouts of rage, despair, and self-destructive behavior. The once impetuous prince spiraled into darkness, haunted by the woman who held his fate and sanity in her hands. In a chilling display of desperation, George plunged a knife into his own chest, bleeding and broken, sending a frantic message, demanding Maria's presence or threatening worse self-harm. This dark episode of emotional blackmail forced Maria into a twisted game of power and pity. The lines between love and manipulation blurred as she navigated the volatile prince's tempestuous moods. Rushing to his bedside, Maria was confronted with a theatrics-laden George, ring in hand and vows spilling from his lips, proposing marriage in a dramatic spectacle, fueled by pain and passion. Yet Maria, ever pragmatic, recognized the madness behind the gesture. She humored his fantasy, but deep down she knew that their union was doomed, impossible under the crushing weight of law and religion. George's desperate love collided with cold, immutable reality. The Bill of Rights forbade him from marrying a Catholic, let alone a woman without royal blood or political advantage. And Maria was both. Their secret marriage, performed without the king's consent, was legally null and a direct threat to the monarchy. Maria fully grasped the political nightmare that their love could unleash, and reluctantly she chose duty over desire. After surviving George's knife episode and his relentless emotional storms, Maria knew the price of proximity was her sanity. To break free, she returned the engagement ring through a messenger and vanished to the continent. But George, consumed by obsession and wounded pride, refused to accept defeat. The tragic, doomed romance of Britain's hidden queen was far from over. The Mistress of George IV, Maria Fitzherbert, Part 2. Desperate to break free from Prince George's obsessive grip, Maria fled to the continent, hoping that distance would shield her from his madness. But George's obsession spiraled into full-blown paranoia. He dispatched a covert squad of detectives to stalk her every move, like a shadowy private army, invading her privacy at every turn. And when spying failed to tame his desperation, George poured his wild, unhinged emotions into a staggering 42-page love letter, a sprawling, desperate plea meant to reel her back into his toxic orbit. It wasn't love, it was a royal stalking nightmare. Faced with George's dangerous instability, including his near-suicide attempt and relentless pursuit across Europe, Maria found herself trapped. The Prince of Wales was willing to risk everything, including the throne itself, just to claim her. Under the crushing weight of his persistence and his dangerously volatile heart, Maria finally gave in, returning to England to marry the man whose passion was as much a curse as a blessing. It was not a victory, it was the start of a new kind of torment. Far from the glittering royal weddings that grace the history books, Maria and George's marriage was kept a secret, whispered only in shadows. Their vows took place in the claustrophobic confines of Maria's drawing room, far from the public eyes. But the ceremony's biggest scandal wasn't its secrecy, it was who officiated. The only clergyman willing to marry them was a disgraced priest rotting away in debtor's prison. To secure his freedom, George paid off his crippling debts, proving just how far he'd sink to legitimize a love forbidden by law and crown. Reverend Robert Burt, an imprisoned chaplain, drowning in £500 of debt, became the key player in Maria and George's illicit union. George's money freed Burt from the chains of Fleet Prison, just so that he could perform the marriage rites. In 1785, Maria Fitzherbert officially became the prince's wife, or so they thought, because under English law, their union was a scandalous nullity, a secret marriage with the weight of royal damnation hanging over it like a guillotine. Unable to reside in royal palaces due to their illegal marriage, Maria and George carved out a bizarre existence in Brighton, then a sleepy fishing village. To house his secret wife, George commissioned an ostentatious castle right next door to Maria's modest townhouse. The sight of this garish fortress was a shock to locals. The royal bad boy's loud, flamboyant attempt to flaunt his forbidden love. Brighton's sleepy streets soon transformed into a buzzing playground for aristocrats, but the town also gained a scandalous reputation, all thanks to Maria and her unpredictable prince. While the aristocracy flocked to Brighton, eager to catch a glimpse of the secretive couple, locals had a different view. Maria, far from being adored, was mockingly dubbed Mrs. Prince, a cruel nickname that exposed the bitter truth. No matter what the prince said, she was no true princess in the eyes of the establishment. The whispers behind her back were poisonous, reflecting the harsh reality that Maria was forever an outsider, a scandalous strain on the royal family's pristine image. Despite being the subject of aristocratic ridicule and gossip, Maria never lost her composure. The cruel jabs and the derisive Mrs. Prince nickname barely fazed her. She had already endured widowhood, financial ruin, and heartbreak. Petty insults were nothing compared to the battles that she had already fought. Maria was a woman hardened by tragedy, and no amount of social snobbery could break her steely resolve. But beneath her calm exterior, the stakes were higher than ever. The secret marriage was a scandal that could not be contained. When King George III and Queen Charlotte finally learned of Maria and George's union, their fury was volcanic. Maria was a Catholic commoner, a forbidden match by law and crown alike. Worse still, George was drowning in debt and disgrace. The royal couple offered financial aid, but it came with a brutal, humiliating price. George had to renounce his secret wife or lose his inheritance and support. The ultimatum tore the prince and Maria apart, exposing the cruel realities of royal duty. By 1787, George was cornered. The crown's financial lifeline was dangling over him, but it came at a terrible cost: the official rejection of his marriage to Maria. Torn between his love and his debts, the prince played a losing game of sacrifice. He chose the crown over his heart, cruelly abandoning Maria and condemning her to obscurity. It was a choice that shattered her and set a pattern of betrayal that would haunt their relationship for years to come. In a public declaration designed to erase Maria from memory, George branded rumours of their marriage malicious falsehoods. The woman who had risked everything for him was denied even the dignity of acknowledgement. Maria was left devastated and humiliated, her heart broken and her dreams shattered. The man that she loved had disregarded her like a worn-out garment, leaving her to wrestle with despair and the terrifying thought of ending it all. Despite all of the pain, Maria tried to forgive George and reclaim their fractured bond, but George's wild ways were never far behind. His infamous womanizing reared its ugly head again, with the enchanting Countess of Jersey, Frances Villiers, stealing his attention. With brutal cruelty, George ended his relationship with Maria, choosing lust and scandal over loyalty. The betrayal cut deeper than ever. Maria was left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart once again. On the 23rd of June 1794, Maria received the cruelest blow, a cold, unfeeling letter officially ending their relationship. No face-to-face confrontation, no plea for reconciliation, just a formal severing of ties by mail. She was not heartbroken anymore, she was enraged. The man she had given everything to had disregarded her with callous indifference. This final act of betrayal marked a permanent rupture, the end of their tumultuous romance. With Maria out of the picture, the Crown and government demanded a proper, politically advantageous marriage for George. Enter Caroline, Duchess of Brunswick, George's first cousin, and a union steeped in duty rather than love. Their 1795 marriage was more about appeasing the state and public opinion than passion, but George's heart remained elsewhere, and his continued longing for Maria cast a dark shadow over his new bride and their doomed marriage. Despite his marriage to Caroline, George could not hide his true affections, and when he died, his will shockingly left all his worldly property to Maria Fitzherbert, my wife, the wife of my heart and soul. The gesture was a bombshell, exposing the secret love that overshadowed his entire life. It was a final, defiant act of passion, but would it be enough to heal Maria's wounded pride and reclaim her place in history? Years of empty promises and broken hearts had extinguished George's desire for Maria. After his wife and his other lovers lost their hold, George launched a relentless campaign to win her back, showering Maria with lavish gifts and reminders of his testamentary devotion. Beneath her hardened exterior, Maria began to weaken. Was this the moment when their tragic love story would finally find peace, or was it just another cruel twist in a saga of heartbreak? As the new century dawned, Maria cautiously reopened her heart to George, welcoming him back in June 1800. Years of pain hadn't dulled her wariness, but she was ready to believe in a future together, perhaps this time for good. Yet their on-again, off-again romance was a toxic dance, fought with past wounds and looming betrayals. Could two such fractured souls ever truly find peace, or were they doomed to repeat their tragic cycle? The mistress of King George IV, Maria Fitzherbert. Even after years of heartache and reconciliation, George's old habits died hard. He fell madly for a younger, more alluring woman, Lady Hertford. She was everything Maria wasn't, fresh, scandalous, and far more exciting. For Maria, this wasn't just another betrayal, it was the ultimate humiliation. She decided enough was enough. With icy finality, she ended their twisted saga in a cold letter, leaving George stunned and exposed. Their on-again, off-again nightmare was finally over, or so she thought. But with George, the drama truly never ends. Maria wasn't just a victim, she was a mastermind quietly waiting in the shadows. As George's father spiraled into madness and died, George ascended to the throne in 1820, where he was crowned king. This newfound power could have silenced her forever, but instead it unleashed George's cruelest betrayals yet. But Maria had a secret weapon that would change the game forever. With the crown on his head, George didn't grow wiser. He became a bitter, venomous tyrant. He launched a relentless smear campaign against Maria, publicly denouncing their marriage as a sham and calling it an artificial marriage just to satisfy her. He viciously claimed there was no proof of their union, hoping to erase her from history. But Maria was smarter than that. She had kept the ultimate proof hidden all along. Determined to reclaim her dignity and her rights, Maria took her battle straight to the Pope. As a devout Catholic, she knew that she needed his blessing. The Pope stunned everyone by officially declaring their marriage valid and putting it in writing. This was a bombshell, shaking the very foundations of the monarchy. Maria was not fighting for love, she was fighting for justice. Maria wasn't done. With the Pope's decree in hand, she made bold demands, a lifetime annuity that would guarantee her luxury and security. George hesitated, torn between royal pride and the shadow of scandal. But Maria's clever leverage, her secret weapon, made it clear that she wouldn't back down without getting what she deserved. Meanwhile, George's infamous lifestyle spiraled out of control. His wild partying, gluttony, and excess earned him a merciless new nickname, the Prince of Wales, a cruel pun on his enormous weight gain. This mockery followed him like a dark cloud, a public spectacle of his physical and moral decay. One can only imagine how much Maria relished hearing about his fall from grace. Despite all of his cruelty, when news arrived that George's health was failing, something in Maria softened. She sent him a heartfelt get-well-soon card, an act of compassion that revealed a love still lingering beneath the bitterness. The king treasured that card until the very end, placing it under his pillow as he faced his final days. Maria waited anxiously for a reply, but none came. She had no idea George's illness was worse than she had imagined. When she finally learned of his death, her heart broke anew. But even in death, George's feelings for her were unmistakable. His last wish was to be buried wearing a miniature portrait of her eyes, an intimate, haunting symbol of a love that neither time nor betrayal could erase. After the king's death, the Duke of Wellington uncovered a cache of letters Maria had sent George, letters filled with passion, heartbreak, and devotion. The Duke wanted to destroy them, fearing that they would reveal the king's secret emotions and scandalize the monarchy, but Maria fought fiercely to keep those precious memories alive, refusing to let their love be erased. What followed was a tense, brutal negotiation. The Duke offered a cruel bargain. He would return Maria's letters, but only if she burned the king's. The stakes were high, the emotions raw, but eventually they reached a compromise. But the cost was heartbreakingly high. In a solemn, almost ritualistic ceremony, Maria agreed to burn every letter, hers and George's, right in her own home, with witnesses standing by. The flames swallowed decades of love and pain, and though the reasons for her choice remain a mystery, it marked the end of an era. But even as the ashes drifted, Maria's fight for her legacy was far from over. When George's brother William took the throne, he sought to end the scandal once and for all. He offered Maria a dukedom, a noble title that could have silenced rumours and secured her status, but Maria refused. She didn't want a title or power. She wanted the world to recognise the truth about her marriage and her place in history. In a bold act of defiance, Maria requested permission to wear widow's mourning clothes, widow's weeds, even though her marriage wasn't legally acknowledged. Wearing black was her silent protest, a public declaration that she was mourning her king, her husband, despite the laws that denied her that right. King William granted her small but powerful victory. Maria lived out her remaining years in Brighton, quietly holding on to the memories of her tumultuous life. At the burial at St. John the Baptist Church, her memorial showed her wearing 3 wedding rings, one for each husband. The third ring, for George IV, was a subtle but poignant reminder of their secret, scandalous union that no one could erase. The biggest mystery of all still haunts historians. If both Maria and George knew their marriage was illegal and can never be publicly recognised, why did they marry at all? Many speculate that a pregnancy forced their hand, an urgent, desperate act to protect a child's legitimacy. But the truth remains locked away, buried in the shadows of history. Whispers persist that Maria bore 1 or even 2 children by King George, children who might have a claim to the throne. Some American families have even asserted royal bloodlines tracing back to this forbidden union. When George died, an executor tried to force Maria to sign a document denying any children existed, but she refused. The secret died with her, but the tantalizing possibility still lingers, a royal scandal waiting to explode.